All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I am Kat, the ServiceLoop host, and today we have the pleasure of having Pam Stater with us. Pam, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about changing STEM's future, one girl at a time. If you could, go ahead and introduce yourself and your background.
Sure. Thanks, Kat. I'm happy to be here today. So my name is Pam Stater. I work at GE Healthcare, and I've been there for almost 2 decades. And I have a lot of experience in the service world. I'm a biomedical engineer out of college, but that was eons ago, I'm sure. And I think what really encourages me to look at our future generations is just that curiosity. How do you instill curiosity and confidence to go and explore and try things and maybe
Mhm.
fail, but then
Yeah.
you know what you can do next and you can try a different way. So,
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned eons ago, right? So we as we've talked about, and I've said this multiple times, in STEM, there is such a short fraction of women that are in this field, right? So I think now it's like 9 to 10%, but prior it was around 2, 3%. How would you say it has evolved from where you were before to where you are now, as far as the industry itself?
yeah, we're making progress, not leaps
Mhm.
and bounds, but you're seeing more role models that you can look at and say, hey, they look like me, and I'd love to
Yeah,
go do it. So it doesn't seem as foreign or as break the glass and hard, which
yeah.
is great. The other thing is I think there's more focus on just that diversity. The difference in genders brings in different ideas, different ways of handling things, different leadership styles. And it's not right or wrong, but it's cultivating more culture
Yeah.
and opportunities, I'd say. So it's really interesting too to go out. I've worked with field engineers across the US and globally and just see the different faces out there, and the paths that they got to get there is crazy. Before it used to be you go to technical college and then you come out and you go. Now any walk of life you can see as a field service engineer, and any different
Yeah.
color face or different persona. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to see that. I think even attending events, seeing the variety, right?
Yeah,
When we attended Field Service Connect, it was nice seeing all the women in that space, but the different diversity in general. I think
right.
it has evolved in the year that I've also been in the industry, little by little. So I think it's very interesting how things can shift and change, like you said, not big bounds and leaps, but little by little. What drew you to a career in STEM?
Well, I will tell you, I didn't even know I was doing it. So,
Yeah.
and I think the more I sit and reflect on where I am and how I got here, the more I realize it was ingrained from when I was little.
Wow.
My
Mhm.
mom is an ER nurse. So I
Okay.
would go and sit there at walk there after school at 3 p.m. and sit in the waiting room until she was done at like 3:40. And then
Mhm.
my dad was an auto mechanic and owned his own business with my uncle. So on Saturdays, when my mom was working, myself and my two younger sisters would be down at the shop and we'd be playing with impact wrenches and running around and moving tires and changing our own oil and all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
I really think I just put kind of two of the careers together. And I had a very healthy background of, I mentioned I had two younger sisters. My
Mm.
dad didn't treat us any different. We were out cutting the grass. We were doing manual labor. My mom was doing the same thing outside, right? Like
Yeah.
we were all doing it as a family and
Wow.
exploring together. So I think it really started from a young age of just not knowing any different.
Nice. So it was like second nature to you. You didn't realize
Right.
like there was that separation, I guess a lot of people feel, especially coming into this type of field. That's
Exactly.
great. That's
And I
awesome.
must
So
say it might be something with like being at the shop, right? It was a male dominated, but I didn't notice
yeah.
it because my dad didn't treat me any different when I was there, and neither did
Yeah.
all of his colleagues there. So,
Wow. That's so nice. I think that's really great that he just, you guys all, especially seeing it all as a family unit, like not just your dad doing it, but your mom doing it, and you guys all encompassing, just making it,
yeah.
like I said, second nature for you. So from your perspective, have you had any unique challenges or experiences with being in a more male dominated industry?
I think you always have that a little bit.
Right.
So I would say I was probably sheltered when I was younger, right? Because I got the exploration and being able to do that without really noticing it. But when you go to high school or college, you start seeing, wow, I look different. There's
Yeah.
not so many like me. College was probably the first time where I was exploring and trying to figure out even if I wanted to do engineering or be in a
Mhm.
STEM field.
Yeah.
And when I chose engineering, I immediately noticed my classes. And
Yeah.
however, biomedical engineering, you saw more females than you did in the normal, like mechanical or electrical.
Okay.
So it was interesting to me to understand of, okay, how do I find teams, right? And where do I input myself? So it took a little bit of courage, right? Every
Yeah.
once in a while to say, look, you don't look like me. It's okay. We can go and work on this project or our capstone or our senior design. And I
Hmm.
have a lot to offer. So that was like the first kind of aha, or I guess pointing out, that I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say the next time really was when I took my first leadership development role at Abbott Laboratories.
Okay.
Great rotational program. And the first role I got was in the kind of the custodial, janitorial, or mechanical, business mechanical environment where
Hmm.
they looked after 31 buildings on campus. So you're talking about HVAC, you're talking about
Yeah.
plumbing, anything. And I was there on a rotation, and one of the leaders approached me one time when my perception is that he thought I wasn't doing any work, even
Yeah.
though I was. And he asked me to make some copies of a stack of pile of papers. And
Yeah.
I sat in that moment frustrated,
Right.
angry even. Why would you ask
Mhm.
me? There's my peers sitting right across the cube and doing the same thing. Why me?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so it was one of those, like, physically sit and be flustered in your own brain and then decide, look, I got to do something. Having that courage, like mustering up that there's got to be something I can say professionally to let them know that I wasn't okay with it. And
Right.
I'd like clarification on why me versus someone else.
Hmm.
So I mustered up that courage and I walked down to the office, and after I had done the copies, and I set it down and I said, I just wanted to acknowledge something and ask for feedback. Was there a reason that you chose me versus my peer to do copies? And
Yeah.
what was it? And let me tell you, from that moment on, he never asked me to make copies again.
Yeah. One, I think I'm glad that you mustered up the like courage to say something, but in a professional manner, because it really set the tone. I'm sure he was probably like, "I'll never ask again." But I think in moments like that, especially when it's a supervisor or someone else, in general, I think people are scared to speak up when they're being, I guess, picked out of the group, right?
Sure.
Or when, like you, there was probably less women there and you
Oh,
were
for
the one
sure.
that was chosen. But I'm so glad that you did say something because it does take courage to do that. I, for one, have never I never knew about STEM growing up. I didn't know that women had those kind of roles. I always seen men in those kind of roles. So
Sure.
I'm curious as to how GE Healthcare developed this program that's aimed at young girls specifically to pursue those careers in STEM. And that
Yes.
age group, why was that age group decided on too? Like, how did you guys develop this?
Well, I came along after it was founded, and I
Okay.
get the privilege now to lead it. So it's been pretty cool to see over the last 6 years, even where we went. But it's a 14-year long program.
Wow.
And it originally started with the investment in the Women's Network. So we have a lot of what we call college resource groups. And there's
Okay.
been many, many years, like 20 years, 30 years, some of these resource groups have been available to the different populations within GE Healthcare. And so the Women's Network was approached by the CEO, as the story goes, and says, look, what do we need to do to get more females in technology in our engineering
Yeah.
teams? How do we get this? And so the leadership at the Women's Network at the time did some research. At that time, it was, the 2%, right, that you
Right.
saw in
Yeah.
technology. And they said, look, it's great. Everybody's going to high schoolers, they're going to people in college. And the intent was then come work for us, right?
Yeah.
And they took a different look at it and they said, that's great, but I don't want this to be self serving. I'd love for them to come work at GE Healthcare, but I just love for girls to go explore and really have a passion for STEM. So they
Mhm.
said, nope, we're going to actually attack the middle school age. So fifth through eighth grade typically is where they went, because that's when, through the research, they saw that girls tend to start making a decision of what they're going to do. And if
Yes.
they're courageous enough and curious enough, and they start, it's that getting to be a teenager where you're kind of like, ooh, I want to fit in. And
Yeah.
STEM didn't always fit in.
Right.
So that was one of the main reasons of we got to get young girls earlier exposed
Right.
to just how cool and amazing they can be, and give them the confidence to do and explore and fail, right? Like, it's okay. This is how you learn.
Yes. So speaking of that learning and failing, can you share a little bit more about the program structure? Like, what does that look like? Yeah.
Yeah. So with the spin of GE to GE Healthcare in the
Mhm.
last 2 years, we actually renamed ourselves this year as STEAM Girls.
Oh,
So
nice.
we're adding art into
Oh, awesome.
STEM, which has been great and a new opportunity. But the overall structure is we are globally camps. Essentially, it's a week-long camp that each one of the locations has a leader or a co-lead with them, and they put together a week long of curriculum, and they work on helping fifth through eighth grade girls get exposure to science, technology, engineering, now art, and math curriculum.
Mhm.
And we tie it into different experiments that can be looked at from what GE Healthcare has to offer. So any of our product lines
Wow.
is some of the experiments that they get to do. And it's really kind of, we have a what we call camp in a box in case there is another location that would like to try and set one up. So India last year just set up their
Mhm.
first camp, which was pretty cool. But to make it easier, right? We have some of the curriculum that the kids are liking
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah.
Making bath bombs is very, very popular. Doesn't necessarily have
Sure.
a lot to
Yeah.
do with GE Healthcare. However, there is a lot of science in it, so that's pretty
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
And then what we allow to do too is looking at how do we get the different students or campers wanting to participate.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of partnerships that we do with local schools. Some of it we also do with local universities to have that exposure, because some of the places that we go to have not even had anyone ever go to college or go
Yeah.
to a university. So just having that exposure to this is possible. It's okay.
Yeah.
So right now we have about 9 different camps that happen.
Nice.
Last year, too, was an inaugural year, not only for India, but we also had a colleague camp for kids. So historically, we didn't have our colleagues' kids going to the
Yeah.
camps. It was more of an outreach program.
Okay.
And we've, in the last, ever since I've been involved, people are like, can I send my kid? And even I was saying, can my
Yeah.
daughter go? Can they see?
Yeah.
There's this sense of pride of what you do, but your children don't get to see you in action
Yes.
all the
Yeah.
time as an engineer. And that is actually from my past. Like, I saw both of my parents work, and my
Yeah.
kids weren't seeing me work. So
Right.
it was, we started a colleague kids camp. And so now we actually get funding. You pay for their camp, and then that funding we donate to some scholarships so that anyone that's graduated the STEAM Girls program can apply for those scholarships and help them go
Wow.
and move further. So lots of cool inaugural
Yes.
building
Yeah.
pieces. Um,
Yeah. That's so awesome, especially, like, allowing I mean, I would too, like, if I was running a program like that, I'd be like, "I want all my kids to attend," like,
Yes.
it just sounds so cool and, like, such a great experience. I like that you also balance, like, what they're interested in with the science backing, like the bath bombs, but then also stuff that is tailored to what you guys actually have to offer, right? Because then it starts to build that storyline of where they would fit in or what makes
Right.
sense to them as they grow with the program. What feedback have you guys received from participants in the program?
Well, I guess let's just say we have a very flourishing alumni program. So many girls are part of they continue with us. They come back
Mhm,
and they have an alumni day at some camps. So one day of the week they come back and they get to see their previous camp leaders or volunteers that were there.
mhm.
Um, I haven't yet been the recipient of it, but I've had witnessed where the co-leader season alumni and the alumni girl is running in and just giving her a great big hug. Like I
Oh,
never knew. I can't couldn't wait. I had to be
yeah,
back. I mean, it's so heartwarming to just say, wow, the transformation in a week of just opening up their eyes, to seeing people that look like them,
mhm,
seeing professionals that are in an environment that they would have never known, to
right,
getting exposure to university, and then also seeing that they can do it. Like, hey, here's an experiment that you just did. You just scanned and created, a prototype in a 3D model, put it in a jello mold, and you scanned it with an ultrasound system and saw the
yeah,
image.
yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see just the power that, trying it once can really do.
Yes, and I think some people need to see that, like, that you have to visually see what's happening versus just hearing about it because it's not as exciting, right, than experiencing it in person. Um, for companies that are out there that are looking to launch similar initiatives, right, to bring more diversity or have programs like this, like, what advice would you give to them?
You don't have to go big. It starts
Yeah.
small. It starts with gauging interest of your own colleagues, who's interested, and then forming it from there. And then it doesn't have to be a week-long camp. It can be an hour session where you take the technology or what you're working on and just really pair it with an easier experiment. So I guess the thing I would say is just take a step. That's
Nice.
it.
Yes, that's great. Pam, thank you so much for sharing the healthcare program that you guys are running for the STEM girls, as well as being a guest on ServiceLoop. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.